Hey everyone, Brian here. Checking out the custom segments in Google Analytics this week. Um, it's a feature that's very powerful, very useful. Not used that often, especially by beginners. It does seem complex. You drop down this huge menu. It looks like there's lots of options here, but the reality is there's not too many. And so I just want to point out a couple things about it. It's going to make it much more useful for you to understand the core uses of it, what you can do with it with respect to AdWords retargeting, things like that. So let's just dive in. There's 4 points that I'm going to go over. So first off, it really makes some impossible drill downs possible. So what this does is essentially these custom segments allow you to use any segment on almost any report, and they can either be custom or they can be pre-made. A lot of these are pre-made, such as bound sessions. All users is the one that it uses by default, and it truly means all of the user types, new and returning, all together. That's what you're looking at. But the cool thing that you can do, what we can do is we can say, let's go take a look at mobile traffic, for instance. We can apply more than 2 looks at this data. This becomes really useful too if you want to export and make a pivot table. I think that we'll go over that in another video though. So creating these segments and using these second dimensions are very similar, except the use of this custom segment is that you can combine 3 or more different dimensions or metrics together. So you can see right now, if we were to remove this mobile segment, let's say we'll remove it. Let's say we'll use device category, which is what we were just looking at, and we'll use that as a secondary dimension. If we wanted to add a third dimension, such as breaking it down by user type, or maybe segmenting for user type and people on desktop or people on mobile, we just can't do it. So that's where custom segments come in. So what we'll do is we will create one right off the bat, and what we're going to do is we're going to create a really crazy one. Create a new segment here. What we want to do is we want to find out new users to the site who abandoned their cart. And you know, there's a lot of options here. We can scroll through all 20 of these, but I think that most of us are probably going to go straight to conditions because conditions will pull in all of the dimensions and metrics available to us in analytics. So let's go right in here. We know what we want. We know we want user type of new visitor, and this will pre-populate for most values, and we'll say exactly matches because we know there are only a couple user types there too. And then what we want to do too is we want to see if people, since they abandoned the cart, that means they must have added something to the cart. So let's say they added a quantity to the quantity added to the cart per session, and we'll say is greater than 0. So that just means that per session, in this session, something was added to the cart. And again, this is an e-commerce, enhanced e-commerce field, so if you don't have e-commerce enabled, definitely enable that. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to say, since they've abandoned the cart, that means that they did not spend any money. So we're going to say revenue per session equals 0. Now, one feature you want to make sure you watch out for, depending on the segment depending on the segment you're setting up, is sessions versus users. Because if you want to target somebody who has never bought, then you would use users, so it filters users to include revenue equals 0. In this case, we just want to know about an abandoned cart because we have a lot of people who repeat, but we also know that they repeat, you know, every month or every 2 months or every 3 months. So we want to make sure we get the people in this period who have been in their cart in this period. So let's see what we get. We got this cool preview over here, so you can see there are people here. If you're not finding users, definitely play around with exactly matching, with per session per hit, and make sure that you're on users or sessions, whichever you need. And as far as the and or here, very straightforward. If we use or, that makes it makes the audience bigger because anybody who is a new visitor or has added something to their cart or has revenue greater than 0 will come together, and that is going to be a bigger piece of the pie instead of coming to the overlap, which is 3.21% of users fit all 3 of this criteria. So let's go ahead and save, see what we get. It's working, it's thinking. Cool. So definitely a small percentage of the users, it said 3%. But the cool thing now is that we can see, some really interesting features about them. I won't go super in depth because this is kind of made up data, but we're seeing 15 pages per session, 10 minutes average on site. So all these highly engaged metrics mean that these are great candidates for buying, but they haven't bought because the conversion rate is 0. So that means that they abandoned their cart, like our segment said. Great candidates for retargeting. So what you can do too is you can import this into Google AdWords, or you can even try and create a Facebook custom audience around these people and retarget them through those channels. When people visit your site and they have a session of 15 pages in 10 minutes and they don't buy and they go to your cart, that's a great case for retargeting right there. So we've touched on how to make the impossible possible by creating segments with multiple dimensions and metrics combined together that usually we couldn't do that. We talked about how good they are for retargeting. We talked about how easy they are to compare and to combine. We can look at all of these together. We can look at mobile and tablet. We can look at desktop, and all of these different types of segments together. And we can apply up to 4 in any report and drill down on what the differences are between them. So right idea to look at people who are on mobile versus desktop and how they perform differently. You can see this is a highly mobile site, so not a lot of desktop abandoned carts. The last thing and the last point I would like to make is kind of making the impossible possible with certain reports. Certain reports don't actually have a great custom or secondary dimension option. So when we use the custom segments, we can use them on reports where we previously were not allowed. So the perfect example of this is reverse goal path. And let me delete some of these because this is getting a little crazy. With the reverse goal path, what we're looking at is the endpoint for the goal. And I'll select one that's very clear. And this segment was actually desktop paid users, not just desktop, so that's why it was so small. And what we want to do is we want to use purchase completed. We don't want to use all these goals because if we're looking at this report, we probably want to drill down on one specific one and see the previous steps that people were at before they checked out. Now, here you can see there's no secondary option. Like we can add one segment here, but I want to look at the segment we created before, which was the abandoned checkout. So I'm just going to do search here. So abandon, new users abandon, cart, find them, and click apply. Now the funny thing is as I click this, I realize that none of these people will be in this segment because they abandoned their cart. But what we can do instead is use a good idea, Brian, and we'll use mobile versus desktop. So move this, we'll let in mobile, and we'll just use this mobile traffic one. We don't need tablet in there either. And now we can see the comparison of all users versus mobile users. I could also layer in desktop instead of all users. It'd be very easy, very simple. And yeah, this will show you the difference. So we do know that different devices have different URL paths. People behave differently when they're doing different things. Very common for people to browse on mobile, convert on desktop. So if you're looking at the reverse goal path report, you can make the impossible possible with this custom segment. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments, and if I can clarify anything, I'll create a new video, respond to you. A lot of people have been sending me comments either in the comments of YouTube or coming through to my site and leaving me a contact form. Either of those works. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks for watching.